When all the guests gathered at the wedding, no one expected the little girl to stop the ceremony, but her words made everyone freeze. Subscribe to the channel not to miss new stories. Write in the comments where you watch this video from. The sun broke over the horizon, casting a soft golden hue across the sprawling estate. Dew clung to the petals of freshly arranged roses, and the crisp morning air carried the faint melodies of birdsong, blending with the distant clatter of plates and glasses being prepared for the day's event. Inside the grand hall, the atmosphere buzzed with the tension of last-minute preparations. Florists in pastel uniforms moved swiftly, weaving white and lavender flowers into the archway under which the couple would soon exchange their vows. Servers arranged crystal glasses on linen-draped tables, their reflections catching the morning light in brilliant flares. The air was thick with the scent of peonies and promise. Today was supposed to be perfect. In the heart of it all stood Alexis Brooks. The tailored silk robe she wore floated around her, but the smooth fabric couldn't hide the strength in her posture. At 39 years old, Alexis carried herself with the elegance of a woman who had fought for every inch of her success. Her skin glowed, her natural curls were pulled back, and the diamond earrings, gifts from her late mother, caught the light with every subtle movement of her head. She was a woman accustomed to control, to precision, and she expected this day, her wedding day, to be no exception. Yet, beneath her composed exterior, a thin thread of tension curled, taut and humming. Alexis checked the list one last time, her manicured finger trailing down the column of tasks. Cake delivered, guests arriving, music arranged, photographer. She turned to see a flash as the photographer captured a candid shot of her profile. She offered a small, practiced smile, then turned back to business. Everything was on track. Perfect. Yet her stomach twisted with something unspoken, something not on any list. "Mama?" The soft voice made her pause. She turned to see her daughter, Taya, framed in the doorway. 7 years old, and every bit the reflection of her mother, from her deep brown skin to the inquisitive, knowing eyes that often seemed to see more than they should. Today, Taya was dressed in a pale lavender dress that floated around her knees, her hair styled in neat twists crowned with tiny white flowers. But her face wasn't lit with excitement. Instead, her small lips pressed into a line, and her dark eyes carried something older than her years. Alexis softened. "You look beautiful, baby," she said, approaching her daughter and smoothing a stray curl behind her ear. Taya didn't smile, only tilted her head slightly, her brows drawn. "Are you happy, Mama?" The question came soft but firm, a child's voice wrapped around an adult's concern. Alexis blinked, startled by the sudden weight of it. "Of course I am," she replied, her tone measured, practiced. "Today's a special day." Taya's gaze didn't waver. "I don't like him." The words dropped into the room like a stone in still water, sending ripples that Alexis felt in her chest. Her lips pressed together for a brief moment before she responded. "Taya, he's not nice," the girl said, her voice tighter now, small fists clenched at her sides. "He's pretending. I know it." Alexis felt the familiar heat of frustration but held it back. She knelt to meet her daughter's eyes, searching them. "Taya, you're nervous. I know it's hard when things change, but David, he loves me, and I love him. You'll see." Taya's lips trembled, but her chin stayed firm. "I don't trust him." The flicker of something colder, older, passes through Alexis's chest. She fought it down. "You're my heart," she whispered, resting her hands on her daughter's shoulders. "But this is right. You'll understand with time." Taya looked down, her little shoulders stiff with tension. I hope you're right. The morning moved on. Outside, guests began arriving. Women in elegant hats, men in crisp suits. Soft laughter and the clinking of glasses carried through the open windows. But Taya felt none of the joy that the day promised. She watched from her bedroom window, her small hands pressed to the glass. Her gaze found him, David Clark. He stood near the fountain, his phone pressed to his ear. From the distance, he was the picture of charm. Tall, broad-shouldered, his suit sharp, his every movement polished. People adored him. Alexis adored him. But Taya felt something cold and sharp whenever he was near. Then he turned and their eyes met. For a moment, the warmth in his face dropped. His smile, which always seemed stretched too tightly around his teeth, faded into something else, calculating, assessing. And then, as quick as a mask, the warmth returned. He raised a hand in a small wave. Taya didn't wave back. Her stomach felt tight. She didn't know why she was so sure. She just was. The tension coiled further that afternoon. Alexis, moving through her preparations, caught herself pausing more than once, glancing toward the grand staircase where Taya had disappeared. She shook her head to clear it. It was normal, she told herself. Taya missed her father. A good man, gone too soon. It was only natural that her daughter felt protective, hesitant to accept someone new, and David, he was good, thoughtful, kind. He had been nothing but patient with Taya's coldness, assuring Alexis that he understood, that he would win her trust. Still, the knock on her door pulled her from her thoughts. She opened it to see her old friend and colleague, Michael Reeves, standing there. His expression was easy, but his eyes held something measured. Alexis, he greeted, stepping inside, his voice warm but cautious. You look stunning. The whole place, beautiful. Alexis smiled, grateful for his steady presence. Michael had known her for years, had seen her through cases, heartbreaks, and triumphs. Thank you. It means a lot that you're here. Michael's eyes shifted briefly, as if choosing his words. I wanted to ask. He hesitated. You sure about this guy? The smile on her lips faltered, only slightly. Michael, I just mean, he added quickly, holding up his hands. I've heard things, whispers about his dealings. Nothing concrete, but... Alexis felt her defenses surge. You've barely met him. I know, he admitted, but I care about you. And Taya. Her voice cooled. Taya is a child. She's confused. And this... She glanced toward the open window where the sounds of her wedding swirled through on a warm breeze. Is my future. Michael studied her face for a long moment, then gave a small nod. Then I trust you. Just keep your eyes open. The sun dipped lower, casting amber across the estate. The guests had taken their seats, and the music swelled, signaling the ceremony's beginning. Alexis stood alone for a moment at the entrance to the garden, her bouquet trembling slightly in her grasp. She drew in a slow breath, steadying the nerves she didn't understand. It was just cold feet. Nerves. It had to be. Behind her, unseen, Taya hovered near the staircase, her heart pounding with something worse than nerves. She had heard him when he thought no one was listening. She had heard David's voice through the crack of his study door, sharp and cold. She signs everything today. No complications. She won't suspect a thing. And now her chest burned with a certainty she couldn't explain. Her mother was in danger, but no one believed her. Not yet. The evening sky deepened, painting the horizon with strokes of amber and violet as the sun surrendered to twilight. Soft, golden lights flickered on, casting a warm glow over the estate. The air buzzed with the chatter of guests and the distant clink of champagne flutes. The rehearsal dinner unfolded in a seamless blend of elegance and celebration, every detail curated to perfection. A night meant for joy, for toasts and laughter. Yet, beneath the polished surface, shadows stirred. Alexis sat at the head of the long, candlelit table, her face illuminated by the soft flicker of the flames. She smiled graciously as her guests raised their glasses to her happiness, their voices a chorus of warm wishes. Beside her, David wore his charm like a second skin, his laughter rich, his hand resting possessively yet tenderly on hers. To any observer, they were the perfect couple. But to Taya, watching from the side of the room, the picture was wrong, forced, false. Taya's fingers toyed with the hem of her lavender dress, her eyes never leaving David. She had been quiet through the dinner, ignoring the polite questions from well-meaning guests who commented on how lucky she was to be gaining such a wonderful stepfather. Wonderful. The word felt bitter on her tongue. Her chest still hummed with the memory of what she had overheard, his voice, cold and sharp through the crack in the office door. She hadn't told anyone yet, not even her mother. What good would it do? Mama wouldn't listen. She never did when it came to him. Laughter erupted from the table as David finished a charming anecdote. Alexis beamed, her hand brushing his in a familiar gesture. But as he glanced across the table, his eyes flicked, quick as a shutter, toward Taya. And there it was again. Something that made her stomach twist. Not warmth, not kindness, something hollow, calculating. Their eyes met, and in that fleeting second, Taya felt the air thin. David's smile remained, but the warmth in it evaporated. His eyes, sharp and assessing, lingered on her a moment too long. Then, just as swiftly, the mask returned. He raised his glass in her direction with an almost playful smirk, as if daring her to speak. Taya's throat tightened. Later, as the guests drifted to the veranda for drinks and music, Taya slipped away. Her small feet padded softly down the corridor leading to David's study. The door, always closed, stood slightly ajar, and from inside she heard the low murmur of his voice. She paused, her heart hammering. "Tomorrow's perfect," David was saying. His tone, stripped of charm, was sharp, cold. "She signs after the ceremony. I'll handle the rest. She trusts me completely." Taya's breath caught. A second voice, muffled and distant, replied through the speakerphone. "And the kid?" David's chuckle was low and dry. "The kid's a nuisance, but it doesn't matter. She's just a child. Nobody listens to children." The blood in Taya's veins turned to ice. Her fists clenched, tiny nails digging into her palms. She had to tell Mama, now. Alexis was on the terrace when Taya found her, the air soft and scented with jasmine. Her mother was laughing with a group of friends, her shoulders finely loose, her face bright in a way Taya hadn't seen in years. For a moment, Taya hesitated. Then her voice, small but urgent, cut through the evening's peace. "Mama?" Alexis turned, her smile softening. "Sweetheart, what is it?" Taya's voice wavered, but her eyes burned with certainty. "I heard him. He's lying. He's using you." The warmth on Alexis's face faded, replaced by confusion, and then frustration. "Taya," she sighed, the exasperation lacing her voice familiar and weary. "Not this again." Taya's hands clenched at her sides. "He's going to make you sign something after the wedding. He said you trust him, that you wouldn't suspect anything." Alexis's eyes narrowed, her lips pressing into a thin line. She glanced quickly around, conscious of the guests within earshot. "Taya," she said, her voice low but firm, "you don't understand. David and I, we're building a life together. Of course, there are things we share. You're not listening. Taya's voice cracked, sharp with helplessness. He doesn't care about you, Mama. The tension between them snapped like a wire pulled too tight. Alexis's jaw set, her face hardening. That's enough, Taya. Taya's eyes stung, but she held her ground. I'm telling the truth. No. The word was a cold blade. You're making trouble. Again, you don't want me to be happy. The silence that followed was a chasm. Taya's breath hitched. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You're choosing him. Over me. Alexis faltered, something breaking in her gaze. No, Taya, But Taya was already turning away, her heart a leaden knot in her chest. The night closed around the estate, the celebration slowly winding down, but Taya's world spun out of orbit. She couldn't make her mother see, couldn't tear the mask from David's face. But if her mother wouldn't listen, she would have to prove it herself. Taya, small but burning with resolve, slipped through the shadows. She would find the truth, and this time, her mother would believe her. The morning sun washed the estate in gold, casting long beams through the towering windows as soft, classical music drifted from the garden. The air felt thick, charged with expectation. Laughter and conversation floated from the terrace, where guests in pressed suits and pastel dresses sipped champagne beneath the sprawling canopy. Every inch of the estate shimmered with the elegance Alexis had envisioned, a dream cultivated through months of meticulous planning. Today was the day. Yet, beneath the polished veneer, something darker coiled. A current of unease, faint but sharp, threading through the warmth of the celebration. Upstairs, Alexis stood before an antique mirror, her wedding gown cascading in smooth folds of satin, a vision of grace and poise. Pearls adorned her ears, and her makeup, soft and natural, highlighted the strength of her features. She was everything she had fought to become: successful, resilient, and at long last, a woman on the brink of happiness. But the reflection revealed something more. The set of her jaw was too tight, the line of her shoulders stiff beneath the silk. She had been chasing the flutter of joy all morning, but it remained elusive, hiding beneath the taut nerves that wound through her chest. The memory of last night's confrontation with Taya echoed, a sharp, raw bruise on an otherwise flawless day. The door creaked softly, and her oldest friend, Michael Reeves, stepped in. His suit was crisp, his demeanor steady, but his eyes, always too observant, flicked over her tense frame and narrowed. "You look," he began, but then tilted his head. "Well, you look ready for a fight." Alexis forced a laugh, brittle at the edges. "That obvious?" He approached, his voice dropping. "I've known you too long to miss it." Her eyes drifted back to the mirror. "Taya's upset. She said some things about David." Michael's face darkened, the easy warmth cooling. "What kind of things?" Alexis turned sharply, defensive. "She's a child, Michael. She's confused. She misses her father. I should have seen it sooner." But his silence pressed at her like a weight, and when she met his gaze, something in it unsettled her. It wasn't judgment, but concern, pure and heavy. "Alexis," he said carefully, "kids see things we don't." A flicker of irritation sparked. "Michael, don't. You've barely met him." His jaw flexed, a crack in his composed front. "I've met enough men like him." Her stomach knotted. "I love him." The words felt exposed, vulnerable, and for a moment, something raw passed between them. Michael's voice softened, but it carried the weight of truth. "I know you do, but don't let that love blind you." She pulled her shoulders back, steel slipping into her spine. "You're wrong about him, and so is Taya." The finality in her voice was a barrier, and Michael, after a long assessing pause, gave a small, tight nod. "I hope I am," he said simply, and with a lingering glance he left her to the stillness of the room. The silence felt deafening. Downstairs, the ceremony was ready. The guests had taken their seats, their hushed anticipation a living pulse beneath the canopy of flowers. Soft music swelled from the string quartet, and petals lay scattered along the aisle, waiting for the bride's steps to carry her into her new life. But the hush was broken. A voice, small but piercing, cut through the gentle symphony. "Stop!" The word cracked the air and every head turned. Taya stood frozen at the end of the aisle, her chest heaving, her hands clenched at her sides. Her dress, the same soft lavender from the night before, fluttered in the breeze, but her eyes burned with something fierce and desperate. "You can't do this!" she cried, her voice trembling but loud enough to reach every corner of the garden. The world seemed to tilt, the gasps of the guests, the sudden halt of the music, the stunned confusion thickening the air. It all funneled into a single, unbearable moment. From the altar, David's face tightened, his eyes flashing with something sharp before he masked it with practiced concern. "Taya," he said smoothly, the charm in his voice stretched thin. "What's the matter, sweetheart?" But the softness rang false, and Taya felt it like a blow. She turned, her gaze locking onto her mother, her voice breaking with raw urgency. "Mama, please, don't trust him. He's lying to you." Alexis's heart slammed against her ribs. For a moment, the world wavered, and her knees threatened to give. Heat flushed her skin, anger, confusion, fear, all colliding in a dizzying rush. Her voice, when it came, was tight, trembling with barely restrained fury. "Taya, what are you doing?" The girl's eyes shone, wide and wet but unblinking. "I heard him last night. He doesn't love you. He's going to hurt you." A tremor ran through the crowd, whispers rippling like wind through grass. Faces turned, questions and curiosity prickling the air. Alexis felt her breath catch, and then the heat boiled over. She moved, closing the distance between them, her heels sharp on the stone path. "Taya, stop this, now." But the girl stood her ground, her small frame trembling, her voice breaking but fierce. "You don't see him, Mama. He's pretending." A hand touched her shoulder, David's. His voice, warm and steady, wove around them, meant for the crowd as much as for her. "It's okay," he soothed. "She's just scared. She misses her daddy." The words struck with a calculated precision, and Alexis's chest burned. Shame and fury tangled, her hands trembling at her sides. She turned back to Taya, her voice low and razor-edged. "How dare you do this? Today of all days." But Taya's face, her face, wasn't the face of a child acting out. It was pale, tight with something beyond tantrum or jealousy. It was terror. Alexis's resolve, cracked and wavering, felt the fracture spread. From the corner of her eye she caught movement. Michael had stepped forward, his face grave. His voice, quiet but firm, reached her ears. "Alexis." It was one word, but it carried weight and warning. David felt it too. His hand, still on her shoulder, pressed tighter. A flicker of something too quick to catch passed through his eyes. A calculation, a threat. Alexis felt the shift, subtle but unmistakable, and something cold slid down her spine. Her gaze, slow and heavy with sudden, dawning disquiet, lifted from her daughter's tear-bright eyes to the man beside her. And in that breath, one charged, terrible breath, she felt it. The mask. And beneath it, the monster. The silence that followed felt alive, swollen with tension. every pair of eyes in the garden fixed on the collision unfolding at the altar. The music had stopped. The breeze, once soft and pleasant, seemed cold now as it brushed against Alexis's skin. She felt it, the unraveling, each thread of her perfect day snapping under the pressure of her daughter's trembling voice. Taya stood, small but unshaken, her chest heaving from the effort of being heard. The lavender petals beneath her feet scattered, trampled and forgotten. Alexis's heart pounded with something too sharp to name. Anger, embarrassment, but threaded through it, fear. Her hands curled at her sides and her voice, tight with control, broke the crackling silence. "Taya, that's enough." Taya's face, flushed and tear-streaked, twisted with desperation. "No, it's not," she cried, her voice raw. "You're making a mistake." She turned to the guests, to anyone who would listen, her voice cracking. "He's lying to her. He only wants her money." A ripple of shocked murmurs swept the crowd, a wave of confusion and disbelief. Faces turned, expressions shifting from amusement to uncertainty. Cameras, once pointed at the beautiful bride and groom, now captured something much uglier, a fracture splitting the celebration apart. Phones were raised, recording the scene, and the air grew dense with the buzz of whispers. Alexis felt her pulse pounding in her ears. Heat crawled up her neck. Anger, shame, and something darker that she didn't want to name. She spun on her daughter, her voice low, shaking with barely contained fury. "How dare you?" she bit out, her tone cutting. "You are ruining—" She stopped herself, breath jagged, the word burning her throat. She couldn't finish it. Couldn't say my wedding. Because what lay beneath wasn't anger at a ruined ceremony, it was something worse, a crack in certainty, a tiny, terrible seed of doubt. A hand touched her arm, David's, steady and warm. His voice came, smooth as glass, pitched for the crowd. "She's just confused," he said, the perfect portrait of patience, his tone gentle but loud enough for everyone to hear. "This has been hard for her. She misses her father. She's frightened of losing you." The words were crafted like balm, meant to soothe. But to Alexis, they felt off, too polished, too public. His hand on her arm felt like a tether, not a comfort. But Taya wasn't finished. She shook her head violently, her small fist tight. "No," she cried, her voice rising, cracking. "You're the one lying." Her eyes blazed and she pointed at him, her voice ringing out with something fierce and unbreakable. "I heard you, last night. You said she wouldn't suspect anything. You said—" Her breath hitched, but she pushed forward. "You said you'd handle her." A collective gasp swept the crowd, sharp and cold as a slap. The whispers exploded into a low, buzzing roar, faces twisting with shock and curiosity. Some guests glanced at each other with wide eyes. Others pulled their phones down, watching now with something else, suspicion. Alexis felt her stomach drop, a hollow, yawning sensation that pulled the air from her lungs. The accusation, so sudden, so wild, struck like a slap. She turned to Taya, her voice shaken, brittle. "What are you talking about?" Taya's voice broke, but her eyes, those eyes that Alexis had known from the moment she came into the world, blazed. "I heard him on the phone," she said, the words spilling fast, desperate. "He said you'd sign something tomorrow, that you trusted him too much to question it." The world tilted. Alexis felt the solid ground of her certainty lurch beneath her feet. Her heart stumbled against her ribs. "What? What are you saying?" A muscle jumped in David's jaw, his hand tightening briefly on her arm before he released it. His voice dropped lower now, pitched for her ears alone, but there was something in it. Tension, a thread of warning. "Alexis," he said softly, "she's confused. This is a child's misunderstanding." Alexis's head spun. She needed to believe him. Needed this to be what he said it was, a child's confusion, a tantrum. But the air felt different now, and beneath the growing knot in her chest, the whispering thing that had nagged her for weeks, months, uncoiled. Behind her, a voice she knew well and trusted cut through the growing chaos. Michael. He stepped forward, his face tight, his eyes locked on David with something sharp and guarded. "Alexis," he said, his voice steady but firm, "maybe you should listen." Alexis turned on him, raw and fraying, her voice high with disbelief and anger. "Michael, not you too." His face was tense, his hands open, pleading without words. "I don't know what's going on here," he said carefully, "but something's wrong. Look at her, Alexis." His gaze flicked to Taya, her small body taut with terror and truth. "This isn't a tantrum." David's voice, tight with barely leashed irritation, cut through. "Are you serious?" he snapped, his polished veneer cracking. "You're taking her side over mine? She's 7 years old." The warmth in his tone had vanished, leaving something cold and sharp beneath. His eyes flicked to Michael, a glint of something dark surfacing. "Stay out of this." The shift in his voice was small, but Alexis heard it, and it hit her like a blow. She turned back to David, her breath shallow, and in the space between her heartbeats she felt it. The thing she hadn't allowed herself to see. She felt his handprint on her arm, where he had squeezed just a little too tightly. She saw the flash in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. She heard the practiced curve of his charm and the hollow space beneath it. The world seemed to slow, the roar of whispers dulling to a hum. Alexis's voice came soft, almost too soft to hear. "David," she said, the faintest tremor beneath his name. "Look me in the eye. Tell me it's not true." He met her gaze, and in his eyes, just for an instant, something moved. A flicker, a calculation, a choice. But it was enough. Her stomach turned to ice. The guests, the garden, the flowers, it all vanished. Only him, and the silence between them, heavy as a fallen stone. She felt her breath catch on the edge of something sharp, then his lips parted and his voice, smooth and honeyed, slid out. "Of course it's not true," he said. "Alexis, she's confused. You know this." But the wrongness was there now, palpable, a living thing. And Taya, her small body trembling with exhaustion, her face pale but defiant, whispered one last broken plea. "Please, Mama, don't let him fool you." The air snapped like a wire, and something inside Alexis shattered. The world felt paper thin, and Alexis stood at its tearing edge. The air around her pulsed with the weight of eyes, of whispers, of cameras capturing every fragment of this unraveling. Taya's voice, raw and pleading, still echoed in her ears, and David's denial, smooth and practiced, slid like oil over her skin. The air felt wrong, thick with something sour. Her throat was tight, and her heart beat in hard, uneven knocks against her ribs. She should say something, anything, but the words refused to come. David's hand, warm but too firm, remained on her arm. She felt the pressure of it, possessive, like an anchor. His voice, low and intimate, brushed her ear. "Alexis, let's step away from this. You're upset. She's confused. Let's not do this in front of everyone." There was a coaxing quality to it, gentle on the surface but with a thread of steel beneath. He wasn't asking. He was directing. Taya's eyes, wide and burning with desperation, flicked from David's hand to her mother's face. "No," she cried, her voice cracking. "He's lying. He just wants you to stop listening." Her little body trembled, but her feet stayed planted. She wouldn't let him pull her mother away. Not this time. Alexis felt her pulse stutter. The pressure of David's fingers on her skin sharpened, and she pulled her arm free. "David," she said, and her voice, though low, carried a dangerous edge. "Let go of me!" His hand dropped immediately, but his face flickered, just for an instant. Annoyance. A splinter of something that vanished before it fully surfaced. But she had seen it, and it landed like a splinter beneath her skin. The crowd around them had turned from spectators to a living wall of tension, faces frozen in various shades of shock, curiosity, and something darker, anticipation. They were watching the cracks form, waiting for the collapse. Phones were raised. The entire disaster was being streamed beyond these garden walls, captured and archived for the world. But no one dared move. Michael's voice, steady but urgent, broke the heavy silence. "Alexis," he said from behind her, "listen to her. Just listen." David's eyes snapped to him, and for a brief, cold moment, the mask slipped. "Stay out of this," he said, his voice clipped, sharp enough to draw blood. But Alexis turned then, slowly, and faced him fully. And her silence was heavier than any accusation. "No," she said quietly, "he's right." She felt the tremor in her chest, the instinct to fold, to dismiss, to protect what she wanted this day to be. But the fracture had been made, and she couldn't unsee the cracks. "You'll answer me," she continued, her voice gaining iron. "What is she talking about?" David's face shifted instantly, the anger smoothing away, replaced by something tender, something soft. "Alexis," he began, and his voice dipped into that place she had once found so reassuring. "You know me. You know I wouldn't." But she cut him off. "Stop!" Her voice, sudden and sharp, cracked the air. "No more deflecting. No more she's confused. I'm not asking about her. I'm asking you." She took a single step forward, her eyes burning into his. "Did you have a conversation last night? About me? About signing something?" There was a beat, a heartbeat, a breath, where something flickered in his eyes. Then his lips parted and he said, "No." It was smooth, too smooth, and she felt it, the lie. It slid through the air, sleek and practiced. Taya's voice broke, ragged. "He's lying." A cold weight was blooming inside Alexis's chest. Her voice came slower now, lower. "Then you won't mind telling me," and her eyes sharpened, a lawyer's edge slicing through the fog of doubt, "what deal you're closing tomorrow." The smallest hesitation, a twitch in his jaw, the faintest break in his perfect mask. It was a fraction of a second, but it was enough. A murmur rippled through the guests, unease. The tide was turning. David's voice came tight, clipped. "This is ridiculous." He lifted his hands as if appealing to reason, his voice rising just enough to pull the crowd back to his side. "She's 7. She heard something, twisted it up into a story." "She heard you," Alexis said, and her voice was colder than it had ever been. "And right now, I think I believe her more than you." The air fractured. The warmth in David's eyes vanished. What replaced it was something sharp, something real. "Be very careful, Alexis," he said, his voice lowered to a dangerous thread. "You're making a mistake." Alexis felt it, the shift, the mask slipping, and what she saw beneath it made her heart slam against her ribs. "I think I already did," she said, her voice clear and cold. Suddenly, David's posture changed. The warmth, the charm, all of it stripped away. "You're ruining everything," he said, and the softness in his voice was gone. "Do you understand that?" "I understand," Alexis replied, her voice low and steady. "I understand everything." And then, from the edge of the crowd, a voice rang out, clear and certain. You don't need to understand anything else. Hands where we can see them." A ripple of shock tore through the gathering as two men stepped forward. Police. David froze. His eyes flashed wide with disbelief, then narrowed with calculation. "What?" One officer, his hand near his sidearm, said firmly, "David Clark, we need you to come with us for questioning." The air seemed to crystallize. David's lips curled, his teeth bared in something too sharp to be a smile. "Who?" His voice dropped, icy and controlled. "Called the police?" Taya's voice, small but steady, cut through the frozen air. "I did." The guest's gasp was a living thing, and all eyes snapped to the child who stood, shaking but unbroken. "I called them last night," she said, her voice trembling but loud enough for everyone to hear. "When I heard you—" David's face, so careful, so composed, split open. His eyes, black with fury, landed on Taya, and something dark surfaced. "You little—" But he never finished. Michael, stepping swiftly, was between them in a breath, his voice cold. "Back, up." The police closed the space. "Enough," the officer snapped. "Mr. Clark, now." David's body was taut, every muscle drawn, his teeth gritted so hard his jaw strained. But his eyes, those cold, predatory eyes, never left Alexis's. And for the first time, the mask fell completely, and she saw the man beneath. The man her daughter had seen from the start. His voice, low and venomous, found her. "You'll regret this," he said, a promise forged in ice. Alexis's heart thundered, but her voice, when it came, was steady, final, and sharp as glass. "No," she said, "I won't." The officers moved, and in a rush of heat and tension, David was gone, swallowed by the wall of uniforms and the cold steel of cuffs. The crowd, frozen and breathless, parted in stunned silence. And then, only the wreckage remained. The flowers trampled, the music silenced, the dream shattered. Alexis stood, her chest heaving, her world fractured. And then, a small, familiar weight pressed into her side. Warmth. Taya. Alexis's knees buckled, and she sank, gathering her daughter close. Taya's small body trembled, her arms fierce as they clung to each other. And Alexis felt her heart crack wide, the ache of fury and loss and guilt all crashing into one unbearable wave. She buried her face in Taya's hair, her voice raw, broken. "I'm so sorry." But Taya's voice, though shaken, came small and certain. "You heard me," she whispered. "That's all I wanted." Alexis pulled back just enough to see her. Really see her. And in Taya's face she saw everything. The fear, the courage, the love that had tried to save her. Her throat burned, and she pressed a trembling kiss to her daughter's forehead. "I'll always hear you now," she whispered. "Always." The ruin of the day lay around them, but in the center, something whole, something unbreakable. The echoes of the confrontation seemed to hang in the air long after the police car had disappeared beyond the estate gates. The garden, once a stage for joy and vows, lay in ruin, a battlefield where petals lay crushed beneath hurried footsteps, and champagne flutes, knocked from trembling hands, glinted shattered in the grass. The guests, stunned into a restless murmur, moved in clusters, their faces tight with disbelief, confusion, and something darker. Curiosity, the hunger for the full story. The warm evening breeze, which had once carried the sweet notes of the string quartet, now seemed to pull at the jagged silence left behind. Alexis stood in the eye of it all, her wedding gown streaked with grass where her knees had hit the earth, her chest still rising and falling with the tremors of everything that had broken. Her arms remained tight around Taya, holding her daughter as if the entire world could vanish, but she would not. Taya's small body pressed into her, and Alexis felt her warmth, her life, fragile and fierce, and wondered how close she had come to losing it. Michael's voice, low and cautious, broke through the ringing silence. "Alexis," he said, the familiar weight of his presence grounding her, "the police are going to need a statement." Alexis lifted her head, her lips parted, her breath still shallow. Her eyes met his, and for a moment she felt herself sinking. The adrenaline that had carried her through the collapse was draining, leaving something raw and hollow behind. Her voice, when it came, was hoarse. She faltered, her throat tightening. "I don't know what just happened." But the words felt false even as they left her lips. She did know. She knew exactly what had happened. The nightmare was the clarity of it. Taya stirred against her, her voice soft but steady. "I do," she said. "He was lying from the start." Her small fingers gripped the fabric of Alexis's gown, holding tight. "I tried to tell you." Alexis's face broke, and a fresh wave of pain crested through her chest. She cupped Taya's face, her voice cracked with remorse. "You did," she whispered, her thumb brushing a tear from her daughter's cheek. "You did, baby. I didn't listen. I didn't." Her voice failed, and she swallowed against the ache. "But I hear you now." Michael, his face still etched with tension, glanced toward the estate where two officers waited. "They'll want to know everything," he said carefully. "What he was planning. What you know." Alexis straightened, her arms still holding Taya close. "I don't know," she said, the truth bitter and heavy. "I don't know what he was planning, but I know where to find out." The house, her house, loomed against the twilight sky, every window lit, every door familiar, and yet it felt like she was walking into a stranger's domain. The place where she had built her life had been infiltrated. The man she had trusted with her heart, her future, had been building something else, something beneath the surface, hidden from her sight. But no more. The veil was gone. She felt the cold clarity of it, and it stiffened her spine. She left Taya with Michael, a brief, tight look passing between them, a silent plea, a promise, and then she moved. The doors opened at her touch, and she stepped inside, her heels clicking against the polished marble. The house was quiet now, emptied of celebration, filled with shadows and the ghost of his presence. She could feel it, him in the air, in every room he had touched, but now every polished surface felt like a lie. The study. She knew where to go. It had always been his domain, the one room in the house where his charm didn't follow her, where the doors, though never locked, had always seemed to stand as a barrier. She had never questioned it. She had wanted to trust, but trust, she now understood, had been his weapon. The door creaked open, and she entered the room where the air felt different, heavier. The rich scent of leather and oak pressed around her, but it was the desk, the wide, imposing piece at the room's center, that pulled her forward. The surface, pristine and ordered, offered no answers, but the drawers, those would. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened the first, neatly arranged files bound in leather, contracts, his work, familiar names, corporate clients, firms she recognized, all in order. But then, a file, tucked beneath the others, a simple manila folder marked only with her initials, A.B., the weight of it, the plain finality of those two letters, turned her stomach cold. She opened it, and the world tipped. Her name, her signature, dozens of documents. But her hand had never touched them. Financial transfers, asset consolidations, her assets moved and mingled into joint holdings under his name. Insurance policies revised, beneficiaries changed, and then, at the bottom, a contract, unsigned but prepared, a full power of attorney. For him. Her throat went dry. It was all here, the plan, the theft that was to be made legal, tomorrow, after she said, "I do." The breath left her lungs, a sharp, hollow sound that felt like breaking. Her hands curled over the papers, fingers digging into the thin flesh of his deceit. Every promise, every word he had ever spoken, every touch, how much of it had been real? How much had been calculation? A sound behind her, soft but sudden, a footstep. She turned sharply, her pulse pounding, and met the eyes of the officer who had been waiting. His gaze dropped to the folder in her hands, and he stepped forward, his voice measured. "That's what we needed." Her lips, numb, parted. "How long?" she asked, and her voice felt distant. "How long has he—" She couldn't finish. The officer's jaw tightened. "Long enough," he said. "He's been on our radar for months. Financial fraud, identity theft. But you—" His eyes met hers, and there was something like regret there. "You were the centerpiece of this one." The weight of it landed all at once, and her knees weakened. She braced against the desk, her breath sharp and uneven. "I let him in," she whispered, the words tasting like ash. "I let him in." Shame, cold and cutting, clawed up her throat. She had brought him into her life, into her daughter's life. She had invited the wolf inside and locked the door behind him. But then, a small voice, fierce in memory, "Please, Mama, don't let him fool you." Taya had seen. Taya had fought, and in the end, Taya had saved her. Her spine straightened, and the cold shame hardened into something else. Something hotter, something sharper. He had tried to take everything. Her trust, her future, her family. But he had failed. Her hands, steady now, gathered the documents. "I want him charged," she said, her voice flat, stripped to something cold and true. "With everything, no deals." The officer nodded. "We'll make sure of it." The house felt different as she walked away from the ruin he had tried to make of her life. It felt hollow, but it wasn't a grave. She would not bury herself in the wreckage he had left. Outside, the air tasted different, cooler against her heated skin. The sky had darkened, but the world had sharpened with it, and every step carried the weight of something breaking and something rebuilding. And there, at the edge of the crowd, was everything that mattered. Taya. Her daughter's eyes found hers, wide and searching, and in them Alexis saw the last remnant of the child's fear. She crossed the space between them, and without a word, she sank to her knees and gathered Taya into her arms. She felt the warmth of her child's body, the tremor still lingering there, and she held her tight. "I found it," she whispered, her voice trembling but certain. "You were right. You were so right." Taya's arms squeezed around her neck, and the child's voice, small but fierce, reached into her chest and shattered the last wall. "I just wanted you to be safe." Alexis's throat closed, and she pressed a kiss to Taya's temple, her voice breaking. "You saved me. You saved us." The ruin of the day lay around them, but it was only ruin of the false things. The real things, this, here in her arms, were whole, and they would build from here, together. The night had fallen heavy and cold, pressing against the windows of the estate with a hush that felt like the held breath before a scream. The garden, so recently a stage for joy and ruin, was silent now, the guests long since scattered, leaving only crushed petals and empty chairs as witness to the wreckage. The world felt hollow, stripped of its illusions, and in the center of it all stood Alexis, unshaken but not untouched. The documents from David's study sat in a thick folder, their weight measured not only in paper but in betrayal. Each page, a piece of the future he had planned for her daughter, a future stolen, carved out of her trust and signed in deception. And he had been so close. One more day. One more signature. But he had made one miscalculation. Taya. Alexis felt the warmth of her daughter's hand, small and fierce, wrapped in her own as they stood together in the grand hallway. The chandelier above bathed them in cold, fractured light, and their reflection stared back from the polished floors, two figures against the ruin. Taya's face, pale but steady, lifted to hers. The child had carried a truth too heavy for her years, and Alexis's heart broke for it even as it blazed with gratitude. "You don't have to be here," she said softly, her voice a raw thread. "You've done enough." But Taya's grip only tightened. "I want to." There was no child's hesitation in her voice, only certainty. "I want him to see that he didn't win." The front doors opened with the sudden sweep of cold air and heavy footsteps. Officers entered first, their expressions impassive, their presence a barrier and a warning. And behind them, David. They had released him for the night, pending formal charges, pending her statement. But he hadn't gone far. Of course he hadn't. She had known he wouldn't. Predators rarely abandoned prey before the final act. His face was a mask again, calm, composed, but too smooth, too careful. His suit, once immaculate, was creased from the police car's back seat, but his posture remained unbroken. His eyes, sharp and cold, found hers immediately. And when he spoke, it was not with anger, but with something worse. Amusement. "Well," he said, his voice a slow, velvet blade. "I'll admit this wasn't how I pictured our wedding night." The officers, standing like statues, made no move. They would not step in unless she asked, unless he gave them reason. This was her moment, her fight. Alexis stepped forward, Taya's hand still in hers, and when she spoke, her voice cut through the air, stripped of warmth. "You lied to me." David's lips curled just slightly. "I did," he said, with the easy grace of a man making a confession he didn't regret. "But not about everything." His eyes flicked down, catching Taya's face, and something darker flared there, something predatory. "I meant it when I said I cared about you, both of you, but caring doesn't mean I wouldn't take what I deserve." Taya's fingers clenched and Alexis felt it, the tremor, the fear still lingering beneath her daughter's bravery. And it snapped something inside her. "You don't deserve anything." Alexis's voice sharpened, her spine a blade of ice. "You used us. You lied. You tried to take—" Her voice cracked with the weight of it. "You tried to take my life. My child's life." His eyes, cold and measuring, never left hers. "You should be thanking me," he said softly, the false charm peeling away to reveal the thing beneath. "You would have had everything. Wealth, security, me. All you had to do was trust me. All you had to do was obey." The word dropped like poison, and Alexis felt the heat rise, the fury that had been simmering now burning through her veins. "Obey?" Her voice, low and shaken, carried an edge that could cut stone. "You thought I would belong to you, that I would hand you my life, my family, my future." His head tilted slightly, the amusement curdling into something cold. "You did." He said it simply. "You handed me everything the moment you let me in." And then, softly, with a thin, knowing smile, "That's the thing about trust, Alexis. It's always a weapon. You just didn't know whose hand it was in." The air felt sharp enough to draw blood. Alexis's body trembled with the sheer, raw heat of it, the grief the guilt, the rage. But beneath it all, something colder and harder emerged. The lawyer, the mother, the woman he had underestimated. "You're wrong," she said, and her voice was no longer shaken. "I know exactly whose hand it's in." She felt Taya's small, unbreakable grip in her own, and it anchored her. "It's in mine." His eyes narrowed, and she saw it, the flicker, the first crack in his composure. "You can't touch me," he said, the words slow, but his voice tightening at the edges. "They'll never make anything stick. And you," his lips curled in something between a sneer and a promise, "you're going to wish you hadn't done this." Alexis stepped forward, and her words, low and lethal, carved the air between them. "You are going to wish you never met me." She extended the folder, his folder between them, the evidence of his theft, his lies, his plan. Every signature, every stolen cent, every word you ever used to trap me. I have them all. And this time, it's your name that's going on the record. His face, for the briefest second, darkened, rage, real and hot, flashing behind his eyes. And it was the first honest thing she had seen from him. The officer shifted, sensing the shift, the thread of violence tightening in the air. But he didn't lunge, didn't strike. Instead, his lips pulled into something that wasn't a smile, but bared his teeth. "You think you've won," he said, the silk of his voice fraying at the edges. "You think this is over." His eyes flicked, sharp and predatory to Taya. "But you should remember, you only found out because she got in the way." The world narrowed to a razor point. And Alexis moved. She closed the space between them, her voice low, shaking with a fury too deep for the surface. "You made one mistake," she said, her body trembling but her words clear and deadly. "You thought you could use my daughter against me." Her eyes burned into his, and for the first time, he was the one who flinched. "But she's not your weakness." Her voice, a blade, landed the final cut. "She's my strength." The officers moved then. One stepped forward, his voice a cold finality. "That's enough, Mr. Clark." His hand landed firm on David's arm. "We're done here." David's body coiled, taut as wire, but it was over. He knew it. She saw it. The fury, the failure, the calculation collapsing. "This isn't finished," he hissed, his voice stripped raw as the cuffs snapped cold around his wrists. "I'll come back. I'll bury you." But Alexis was already turning, already pulling Taya close, already stepping through him, not around him. Her voice, soft but unshakable, was the only answer he would ever get. "You already lost." The door closed behind them, and he was gone. The house was silent then, but it was a different silence, a clean one, a silence from which something new could begin. Taya's voice, soft and small but steady, broke it first. "Is it really over?" Alexis's breath trembled, her arms tight around the heart that had saved her. "No," she said honestly, her voice thick and real. "But he is." She pulled back just enough to meet her daughter's eyes, and her voice, fierce with love, promised the only truth that mattered. "And we," her lips shaking with the start of something unbreakable, "we are just beginning." And outside, the night, vast and deep, opened to the dawn. The sky was soft with the pale, uncertain light of morning, the first warmth of the sun brushing against the estate's worn edges. The ruin of the wedding, the trampled flowers, the toppled chairs, remained untouched, but the air had shifted. It felt clearer. The thick, suffocating pressure that had haunted every corner finally lifted. Inside, the house stood quiet. No longer the kind of quiet that follows a blow, ringing and raw, but the kind that comes after a storm. Still, fragile, waiting for something new to grow in its wake. Alexis sat on the floor of the living room, her back pressed to the couch, her knees pulled close, the wedding gown still clinging to her in wrinkled folds. The dress felt foreign now, a costume from another life, one that no longer fit. Loose strands of hair stuck to her damp cheeks, and her face, stripped of the day's careful paint, was raw with exhaustion. The adrenaline that had carried her through the last hours had drained, leaving behind a hollow ache, a weight that pressed against every inch of her. But the ache wasn't defeat. It was something else, the heaviness of having survived. In her hands was the folder, the thick spine of David's betrayal, the pages worn now from her grip, corners bent from the force of her rage. She had read it all. Every forged signature, every stolen promise, every piece of his plot, carefully built and waiting to close around her. He had tried to take everything. He had nearly succeeded. Nearly. The warmth beside her stirred. Taya, curled against her side beneath the folds of the abandoned veil, lifted her head, her eyes still heavy with the weight of the night. The little girl hadn't left her side, not since the moment David had been taken away. Even as the officers asked their questions, even as the last of the guests filed out in the stunned whispers, even as the house settled into its broken silence, Taya had stayed. Her daughter, her shield, her light. Taya's voice was soft, a thread of sound in the vast room. "Is he gone?" Alexis's arms tightened, her lips pressing to Taya's curls. "Yes," she whispered, and the word felt like a vow. "He's gone, and he's not coming back." Taya was silent for a moment, her small body stiff against her mother's side. "I was scared," she said finally, her voice cracking with the truth she had held for too long. "But I didn't want to let him win." Alexis's throat burned, and she pulled back just enough to meet her daughter's eyes. "You didn't," she said, and her voice broke, fierce and soft all at once. "You saved me." The tears came then, unbidden and hot, spilling freely as her hands cupped Taya's face. "I didn't listen. I didn't believe you. But you never gave up on me, and I will never, never stop listening to you again." Taya's eyes, wide and wet, searched hers, and for the first time the fear that had lived there, too old, too heavy for someone so small, began to fade. Slowly, her lips trembled, and then she was crying too, her little body collapsing into her mother's, her fingers clutching tight. "I love you, Mama," she sobbed, her voice muffled against Alexis's chest. Alexis's arms, strong and unshakable, folded around her, holding her as though the entire world could fall away, and it wouldn't matter. "I love you," she whispered into her daughter's hair, her voice breaking and true. "More than anything, more than everything." The house, so recently a place of shadows and deception, now held only them, mother and daughter, their heartbeats a single, steady rhythm. And in that space, where the lies had been torn down and the truth laid bare, something else began. A knock at the door broke the stillness. Alexis's body, on instinct, tensed, her arm tightening protectively around Taya. But the voice that followed, familiar, steady, eased the cold wire of fear before it could coil. "It's me," came Michael's voice, low but certain. "You up for company?" Alexis met Taya's eyes, and for a moment, something passed between them. A silent question, a choice. Taya's head gave a small, almost shy nod. "Come in," Alexis called, her voice rasping from the night's wreckage. The door opened, and Michael stepped in, his face drawn with the weight of all he had witnessed but softened with something else. Relief. In his hands, 2 steaming paper cups. "Thought you could use this," he said, offering one to Alexis. "And He glanced at Taya with a half-smile. Hot chocolate, extra marshmallows. Taya blinked up at him, her face still tear-streaked, her body half hidden against her mother's side. Slowly, tentatively, she reached for the cup, her small fingers brushing against his. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet but clear. Michael's smile was gentle, the corners of his eyes creasing with warmth. "You're welcome, hero," he said softly. Alexis's fingers curled around her coffee, the heat seeping into her cold, aching palms. "Michael," she began, her voice rough with the edges of everything that had passed between them, everything he had tried to warn her of, everything he had stood beside her through. But he shook his head once, his voice firm but kind. "You don't have to say it." His eyes, steady and certain, met hers. "I know." The air settled, and for the first time in what felt like forever, it carried no weight. Just the warmth of the coffee, the soft sound of Taya's quiet sips, and the certainty of the man who had been there. Quiet, constant through it all. Finally, Alexis spoke, her voice low but resolute. "It's over," she said. But now, her eyes dropped to Taya, her hand tightening protectively around her daughter's. "Now, we begin again." Michael nodded, his voice easy but sure. "Together." The warmth of the morning grew, and the light through the windows was no longer cold. It was soft, golden, the kind that promises not endings, but something new. The kind that follows a long, dark night. The kind that says, "You made it." Taya's voice, small but certain, reached through the hush. "Are we going to be okay, Mama?" Alexis looked down at her daughter, the bravest heart she had ever known, and felt the answer rise from somewhere deeper than her bones. She brushed a soft kiss to Taya's forehead, her lips pulling into a smile that was tired, yes, but real. We already are. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe for more captivating narratives and thrilling plots. Share this video with your friends and family to spread the excitement. And don't forget to check out our other videos for more unforgettable stories. See you in the next one.